Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Param Om Shanti 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 On Chapter 9 How Hemashudha realized the self after analyzing his own mind and plunging within. So we have seen before the entire dialogue on which his wife was teaching him that she was teaching him more this passion. And the last chapter she was telling the story of her mother and so on, that parable, and it was explaining the meaning, the symbolism behind that. So he was pleased with her, and then he said, "Okay, now let me go and see if I understand that." So the initial verse, Hemashudha was saying, "Okay, I did not know you were such a wise person. Your profound wisdom is something I was not aware. I did not know how elevated you are. I understand now that the very purpose of one birth, human birth, is to realize one's nature. So he was getting to the right track." And then Hemaleka told her husband, "Yes, listen carefully to what I'm going to say now. It's subtle, but it's simple. Investigate the nature of the self with an intellect which is very transparent and clear and focused and purified. It's purified by the means of all the pujas and the rituals and devotion you have done so far. The self is not an object of perception. You know the mother only if you know the self. You want to know my mother, you're going to know my mother to the degree you know yourself. If you don't know yourself, you're never going to know my mother, and I'm going to have to keep present my mother in analogy or metaphors until you know yourself, and then you understand those metaphors. The self does not admit to any qualities, specification, and so on. No teacher can teach it in a manner that this is what it is, like Papaji used to say. You sit in front of Papaji and then you have a nice experience, and then you say, "This is it. This is it." James used to make fun of people, the "this is it gurus." So no, the self is not something that you can say, "this is it." You understand? The self is a certain understanding, which is not a product of an experience, although in certain cases an experience can give birth to this certain understanding. As Sundari once said, so knowledge, self-knowledge is almost like a time, how you say time, a time capsule. There is an expression in English, a time-bound capsule or something like that. It's just capsule they are programmed to release its content gradually. You say you have an experience, and then within that experience, within that mental state, like one of those medicines, you have a time frame. Sylvia just made it now. We have a time frame in which you can extract wisdom, you can extract this understanding. But as you know, unless you have an inquiry vasana, you're going to enjoy that nice, friendly experience, and you're not going to think in terms of inquiring. Now, why I'm going to disturb this beautiful state of mind? So the self can never be taught like that. The self is all-pervading and pervades even your personal deity, your personal Krishna, your personal Vishnu. The self is that in which your Krishna and Vishnu and everything emerge, appears as an apparent reality. So it surpasses demonstration, cannot be validated by this is it. However, how, where, and when, or by whom it has specifically described, even incompletely. What you ask me amounts to ask me to show your very eyes. I cannot show your eyes. I cannot show yourself. Only you can face yourself. Even if you ask someone like Arlindo used to ask, oh God, show your face to me. God was somehow laughing at me, say, oh my God, he wants me to show myself to him, you know, and I cannot do that. Not even God can do that. Only us, we can realize the self, which is our true nature. Huh? Even the best teachers, even God cannot bring your eyes to your side, just as a teacher is of no use in this case. So in the other case of showing you your true nature as the self. Why? Because you are looking for the self in a wrong place. No? If we watch samsara is looking for the self again and again in a place, you know, which the self is, but it is not. It cannot be recognized. It has to be recognized within. Somehow it needs to be recognized as your true nature, and then you can recognize it as the nature of everything. A lot of people goes and look outside and say, yes, we are one. There is only God. God is in everything. But unless you really understand and claim your nature as Brahman, you are not going to be able to see Brahman in everything. So it has to be realized by yourself. And we have the teachings that help that, the guru, the teacher who facilitates the understanding, but not even Himalekta could do that for the prince, her beautiful future king. Yeah? And then she says, now I'm going to explain the means to realize the self. Listen attentively, as long as you are contaminated with notions of me and mine. So now she brings two levels or one level of abstraction. So because he wants to know, I mean, what is abstracting it? Why I don't fully grasp it, you know? And then she says, as long as your mind, your ego is still holding the notion of me, I, in mind, my body, my mind, my home, my intellect, my relations, and so on. The self will not be realized or recognized, for it lies beyond cognition and cannot be realized as myself. It lies beyond cognition. So it is, when we talk in terms of cognition, usually we refer to cognitive knowledge which travels through the five senses, okay? So it's a cognitive knowledge, but the direct self-knowledge is something somehow different. And here, Himalekta says that it's beyond the intellect, it's beyond intellectual cognition, okay? And that definitely cannot be realized as myself, okay? So it can be realized as I the self, the only self, but not myself, my Brahman, my God. So it lies beyond cognition. This is an interesting affirmation, but it's my understanding that it points to the fact that it's not a common mental knowledge or intellectual knowledge based on the five senses and the mind, which is the intellect, connecting the dots to understand something out there. No, direct, immediate self-knowledge is something that is other than a knowledge related to something that I have to connect the dots and understand out there. It's not a media knowledge, not a knowledge within the field of manifestation or phenomenal object. It's something that is the very nature of the very subjectivity of the Jiva Atma. So it cannot be realized as mine. It can be realized as I, the self. I is the self. Retire, though, in solitude. Analyze and see what those things are, which are cognized as mine. Discard them all, and transcending them, look for the real self. So forget about yourself. Yeah. Look for the self, not yourself, if you have any sense of possession in regards to the self. You understand? So it's subtle, you understand? Oh, myself, I'm searching for myself, I'm searching to the self, the only self there is. That's the pointer. No? But the moment that we start putting this mind, we may be going into delusion. Look for the real self. For instance, you know me as your wife and not as the self. And here she puts yourself. You know me as your wife and not as the only self there is. I'm only relate to you, but I'm not part of you, much less your very being. I'm only relate to you and not part of you, much less your very being. So you consider me, you know me as your wife. Né? You don't know me, much less you know me as your very being. That's what I understand in this passage here. Analyze everything in this way and discard all I and mine, the ego. What remains over in the ego's possessions, what remains over transcends it all, beyond conception, appropriation, and relinquishment. So it's not something that requires you to gain, retain, or push away. And you're not going to gain it by conceptualizations in regards to what is the self. All of those things, it serves a certain purpose. The purpose I've described the self as without any attributes is somehow helping the intellect, the mind, to stop thinking of the self as something colored by the gunas, okay? The self as something defined by qualities, specifications, attributes, and properties. No, to stop the mind to go that way, say there is no attributes, property, there isn't anything, okay? So and then she says, stop thinking of the self as something like that. Analyze everything in this way and discard it. What remains over, transcend it all. It's beyond conception, appropriation, and relinquishment. Know that to be the self. What is left is the self. That knowledge is the final emancipation. It's the very simple, same net teachings of Vedanta, of the Upanishads. So you are looking for the self, and then you have to go. If you're really stubborn, you're going to have to look everywhere, in any object, you know, sentient or even under the stones, you know, you'll say, where is the self? And then you're going to go and say, not here, not here, not this, not this, not this. You're going to go through trillions or so places looking for the self, but we don't need to do that, okay? You just reject everything. And then what's left is what? What is left when we reject or we discard the possibility or we give up looking for the self out there in some object of experience? When we are looking for everywhere, everything, and then we say you're never going to find the self, and then what's left what? Is the light of consciousness illumining and revealing everything and everywhere you are searching for the self. The light remains, revealing the hand, okay? Not being part, product, or property of the hand. The light is the illuminator, the revealer. And once you really exhaust this search out there, and then you are left with realization, the realization that I am this light, which was allowing my mind, my intellect doing this search. But I was searching the wrong place. I was searching the wrong place, and the Upanishad is trying to, redirect our search redirect, but this old extroversion, mental extroversion, intellectual extroversion is stubborn. And then it takes some time. And then we see it's the most simple thing. And I trust you guys have understood it already. Okay, what you are, I'm this light of consciousness. And there is only one consciousness. Marx, Lin's, and Sylvia's, and Arlindo's consciousness is one in the same. This knowledge is very powerful. It has the power to remove most of the possible discomfort, mental, emotional discomfort of the human experience, the psychological suffering, when you know that you are consciousness and consciousness is altogether the only reality, and it's something that is not really integral part of Mithya, this phenomenal world, but it somehow is the background of this Mithya phenomenal world. Not being touched, like space, like the screen, never touched by anything. The self is never affected by the body-mind's experience. So that knowledge is final emancipation. After receiving these instructions from his wife, Hemashuddha rose hurriedly from his seat, mounted his horse, and rode away from the city, entered the royal, beyond the outskirts of the town, went into an imposing crystal palace. He dismissed his attendants and ordered the keepers, let no one enter these rooms while I am in contemplation. Again, it reminds me of Nisargadatta Maharaj. Nisargadatta Maharaj did not have such a favorable karma, but he had enough good karma to work during the daytime and then retire after 7 p.m. And then there was a note that, no, do not disturb, I'm in contemplation. Okay, then he went up to a fine chamber in the 9th story, which looked out in all directions. What is this story? Is the level, 9th level, life to store? Because 9th store, I did not know that there was a word with a Y in the end.
I think that when you say 9th story, it is without the E. Am I correct, Mark?
Yes, the E doesn't look correct to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is also, it may have some symbolism to it. So he went up into this crystal palace, into imposing crystal palace. So it looks good, it looks very luxury and clean and beautiful. And then he went up to a fine chamber in the 9th floor. And from there, he looked out in all directions. So it may have some symbolism. We could say that it is the self. It could say that is the purified intellect looking down and analyzing and inquiring with the intent to reject all those different levels of human experience as the self. Okay, none of those experiences are seen as the self, and he went there to realize that. Okay, that the self cannot be seen on anything. The room was well furnished, and he sat down on a soft cushion. He collected his mind and began to contemplate. Truly are these people these people are deluded. Not one of them knows even the fringe of the self, but all are active for the sake of their own selves. Okay, that's a way to begin the inquiry. But he could avoid seeing that on the people out there, and he could just say, I myself, I have been deluded. I have never really understood the fringe of the self, all my activities for the sake of their own self, but all my activities were for the sake of my own self. So he puts in terms of them because he's looking out and he's looking far out, observing others, Okay, it's easier to see the flaws and limitations of others, the ignorance of the other. And then he says, but every human being, all activities active for the sake of their own selves. So this is interesting because we do what we do until we stop doing for that purpose. We do with the intent to please the self. So there's nothing we do which is for pacifying the self, for making the self feel complete, happy, satisfied. The self is under the spell of ignorance, of vidya, and then we do what we do to satisfy the self because somehow it does not feel right, the self, to have this experience of limitation and inadequacy and insufficiency and all of these things, So, and then we do things. We want to regain our sense of limitlessness and peace and satisfaction. So they are all actively doing something for their own selves. And they are not understanding that they do that for their own self, but the self itself does not need any doing for the sake of satisfaction. They don't need to do things to bring about the limitless nature, the peace, and the ananda nature of the self. So, but they are all active, doing things for the sake of the self. I have self, I love the self. There's nothing in the world I love more than myself, the self. I think that is my own self. I have a unique self. But doesn't matter, the self, I do everything for the self. I think that the self is myself. But in any case, I'm trying to please myself, and I do not understand that myself does not need to be pleased. The mind needs to be pleased. You understand? The mind wants to be pleased, and we are enslaved by the mind with its desires. It corrupts even the intellect, and intellect it keeps doing, oh yeah, go for this, go for that, try this, try that. We are trying to please the self, and the self does not need to be pleased because it is the very source of peace and happiness and contentment. Some of them recite the scriptures for the sake of the self. A few study them in their commentaries. Some are busy accumulating money, wealth for the sake of the self. Others are ruling the land for the sake of the self. Some are fighting the enemy. Others are seeking luxuries. When engaged in all this selfish activity, they never question what exactly the self is. I'm doing everything to my good friend, Mr. Self, and I never ask the self if he needs something in order to feel okay. And I'm doing all of that. So I never really know Mr. Self. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it has desires and needs, and I don't understand that it's my mind with desires and needs, are doing what they're doing for the sake of the mind. The mind is superimposed on the self, and I believe that I'm doing to myself, but unfortunately, everybody says myself, they are referring to the mind and its desires and fears. Why there is such a confusion? When the self is not known, all we do is in vain. It's exactly like what we do in a dream. There is confusion because we haven't really understood what is the I, what is the Atma, what is the self. We take the mind to be the self, and then we want to please the impostor, the I with a load of likes and dislikes. But the self is not known. I was not even introduced to myself to understand if the self needs to be pleased. All I do is just a waste of time and energy because I'm trying to please the mind, and I will never be able to please the mind. Why? Because the mind is unpleasable. Why? You can please the mind, you provide the mind an object of desire, and the mind is like that terrible spoiled child. And immediately, before you bring that gift, that desired object, the mind is already saying, yeah, not enough. I want also this and this and this and that. So you are never going to please the mind unless you understand the nature of the mind. So when the self is not known, everything I do is a waste of time and energy. So I will now investigate this matter through my home, my kingdom, my wealth, my treasure, my woman. None of this is me. And they are only mine. So here Hemaleka, or him, the author here, presenting this story between Hemaleka and Hemashudha, he tells that Hemashudha started contemplate, and then he says that none of these things, which includes my body and the body of my wife, the kingdom, my riches, and so on, none of this is me, but they are mine. Okay, there is a concession to ignorance there, because we know that anything we have, including our body, we can never say, oh, I am self and this body is mine. No, I am the self and this body is an instrument of Ishvara, so that I, the self, can experience duality. But here it makes a subtle distinction in this passage. You say, none of these, my body, the body of my wife and my cattle, my rich, my kingdom, none of these is me. They are only mine. Okay, let it be that way. I certainly take the body for the self, but in fact, it's simply a tool of mine. When he says mine, we could say like, so maybe he's referring to consciousness, to Brahman, okay? Because everything could be said, everything resolves itself in Brahman. And then if there is a cause of all of this, is Brahman, is Satchitananda, under the power of the effect of the power of Maya. So it makes a progress and say, I know I still fall for this misidentification with the body as myself. I take the body to be myself. But actually the body is simply a tool of mine. Okay, so the body is a tool, yes. But who is using the body? Because the body here either refers to the physical body, and then it's a real tool, even for what? It's a tool for the sense organs, it's a tool for the mind, to the ego, to the intellect, to everything in the subtle body needs a physical body. And the physical body is a tool for the subtle body. So, but what is the mind here? Is it the subtle body who is seeing the physical body as a tool? Yes, could be, or it is consciousness who is seeing the body here, referring to the body-mind complex as a tool, an instrument of experience, so that the agent Jigva Atma can experience and know this manifestation. I am indeed the kingdom son with goodly limbs and a fair complexion. These people too are taken up by the same notion that the bodies are their very I, the very egos, the eyes, they are identified with the body. And he refers to his body, saying, I have a good body, king's body. I was born out of the king. So with a good body and a fair complexion, and everybody as well, believing to be the body, they are taking the body to be the I, the I. This is one level of identification with the physical body. Reflecting that, he considered the body. He could not identify with the body as the self, and so began to transcend the body. So, this body is mine, not me. So if we look at it from the point of view of the subtle body or the Jiva Atma or the intellect, this body, okay, I have identification with this body because somehow this body wakes up with me every morning. And then I say, okay, it is my body. Okay, I, the intellect, take this body to be mine. Why? Because it follows me everywhere. Everywhere we go, this body is following us. Okay, I'm going to adopt you. I say, you are my body. Huh? So he could not identify the body as the self, but somehow, it's not what I am, but it's my body. And so began to transcend this sense, I am the body. And then again, he said, this body is mine, but it's not what I am. This is already a certain progress. It's built up of blood and bones and is changing each moment. How can this body be the changeless, continuous I, me? Now he referring to the continuous, changeless I, the self, Brahman. Huh? So now he is referring to Tripura, the mother, the self, all pervasive, never changing, never doing anything, never not present, ever present consciousness. So how can this body-mind complex, changing all the time, be I, the changeless, continuous self, as I was told by my wife? Yeah, it looks like a chattel, and it's apart from me. What is this chattel? This word?
It's a property of yours, not like an attribute, but a thing owned.
Okay. It looks like a chattel. It's apart from me, as is a waking body from the dream, seen from the dream. So I cannot be the body, nor can the vital force be the self. The mind and the intellect are clearly my tools, so they cannot be the I. Now we come to a clear understanding that from the very beginning, he was looking from the standpoint of the self, of limitless conscious existence, and then not only the physical body, but the subtle body in all its functions are seen from the standpoint of the self as not I, not me, but instruments at my disposal. They are tools, they are clearly tools, so they cannot be I. They are instruments by which I experience. I am sure there's something apart from all of these, beginning from the body and ending up with the subtle intellect. So now he has transcended the physical body and the subtle body, and he sees everything objectively. And he's coming to the point to understand what is the self, and in which way this sense of I, misidentified I, which brings about this notion of mind, okay? This misidentified I, identified with the body-mind complex, and then its possessions. This is an abstraction. So he's trying to demolish this ignorance, and then he begins seeing things as objects of or instruments of experience from the standpoint of the self, beginning from the body and ending with the intellect. They are mere tools at my disposal. My disposal, no?
Arlindo, this is Driksha Viveka, right? He's going through the seers. And he hasn't quite gotten to seer, I think it's 3 in that text, but yeah, working his way.
Yeah. Vedanta is very simple. It's basically the teaching, it's presented slightly different, but it's once you around for some time, there is nothing much, you don't find much new notions and concepts or teachings within Vedanta, you know? You just do that until it's clear, but it's very simple. In the beginning, it was overwhelming. I say, oh my God, it's so complex, it's so vast, and so many Upanishads, so many these. And then once you start figuring out the teachings, and then you have a picture. So it's very simple. It's very simple, in truth. So the intermediates here, the tools are the sense, the mind, including the thinking and the reasoning, intellectual, and the coordinating faculties. Okay, reasoning, coordinate faculties refers to the intellect. All of that are the tools, the intermediates between I, the self, and the world. The vital force as well. So the pranas is another level of human experience. And I need this vital force to experience through the senses and to determine, to make to have my feelings and sensations at the level of thoughts and sensations and feelings, and my reasoning and determination. So I need the vital force as well. All of these are integral parts of the functions, which allow us to have this instrument of experience / knowledge. And then he says something interesting. I say, okay, so I got the picture, but the reason for this inability is not clear to me. I'm always aware, but I don't realize that pure state of awareness. I'm always aware. I know that I am something other than the instruments at my disposal for experiencing the moment, the world. But although I'm always aware, I see this instrument. There is something stopping me from realizing clearly that I am the self. Why I'm not realizing that I am that pure, limitless awareness, consciousness? The reason of this is this obstruction or inability is not very clear to me. So he's going to further inquire. And if he does not come to an answer, I can bet that he's going to run to Hemaleka. Objects are cognized through the senses, not otherwise. Life is recognized by touch, and mind is recognized by intellect. So the intellect is above the mind. It's going to recognize the mind, and then the world is going to be recognized by the 5 sense instruments. Okay, so everything has its sequence of the denser to more subtle. The instrument we know very well, the seers, the different levels of the seers, as pointed out by Lin in the teachings of Drisha Viveka. So, but the intellect, by what is the intellect made evident? So what is the seer? What is the witnessing knower of the intellect? The intellect seems to be the very instrument to know everything. So now, who is aware of the intellect? Now, this is an incredible, profound question and philosophical that we may have to come out with more than one answers to respond that, So by what is the intellect known? By whom is the intellect made evident? I do not know. I now see. I'm always aware. Okay, I'm aware of everything. So I'm aware of my body-mind complex, which is my instrument to know, and I'm aware of everything that I know through this instrument of knowledge. So I have this means of knowledge, physical, energetic, and then I see the world and I experience the world. And there is something that is always aware. I'm aware of the world, and I'm aware of the instruments by which I know the world. So I'm aware. But how so? What is this I that is aware of the body-mind complex? What is the I that is aware of the intellect and everything below the realm of the intellect? Realization of that pure consciousness awareness is somehow abstracted by other factors. And it can only be factors pertaining to the not self. The not self is somehow covering or obstructing it. And it's right to the point. The not self is obstructing this realization. Why? Because we want to realize the self as an object of knowledge experience. And then we superimpose the mind, the intellect on the self. And then you say, no, the intellect is the one, the ultimate reality, is the ultimate seer. This reflect consciousness. Once it's purified, that's the ultimate reality. So there is something that is obstructing. I'm always aware, but I don't realize this pure awareness because there is some other factor, some other events pertaining to the not self, covering it, concealing it. Now I shall not imagine them. So I shall not imagine these factors that are obstructing my clear realization. I is the self. There are some obstruction there. My realization is obstructed by some factors. Now I shall not imagine anything. So what it means? It says that these factors, they belong to the not self. The not self is anything that can be seen, witnessed by me. Anything below the level of the subtle intellect, let's put it out that way. So I know what I'm gonna do. So if the abstractions are coming from the not self, and the not self begins with my mental activities by which I contact and superimpose my vision of the world, and this vision of the world seems from there, from Nietzsche, the abstraction is coming, I'm going to suspend Nietzsche. I'm going to somehow stop this. And then he says, okay, I have a good idea. I'm going to not think of Nietzsche anymore. Now I shall not imagine anything of the world, because anything come from there is the non-self, and they are obstructing. The abstraction cannot come from the self. The abstraction can only come from the not self. And then Hema Shuddha had the brilliant idea, like most people, I will never imagine anything of the world. See, if I don't connect my mind to those things of the world, they will not appear. They cannot appear without my mental attention, imagery of them. And if I don't think of them, if they do not appear, they are not going to obstruct the glory of my conscious awareness. Very good thought, very good process, very good logic. The world is a problem, but there is a flaw in this conclusion. So from the angle, from the point of view of experience, it's okay. You say, okay, so now I want to have an experience of satisfaction, peace, and fullness, or bliss. And then what I have to do? I have to remove. Let me stop. I have to remove the world, and any thought relate to the world. Thinking thus, he forcibly arrested his thoughts. I was looking for this word before. I'm going to arrest all notions and ideas about this word, because abstraction is coming from there. So forcibly, he arrested his thoughts. Instantaneously, a blank superseded it. He, at the same time, decided that it was the self. And then there was an emptiness, a blank mind. Nothing is there. Oh my God, I have heard that before. It is the emptiness, the void is the self. Instantaneously, he went into a deep blank, and he immediately concluded that that is the self. He was extremely happy. And then said, now I got it. Now I know what the self is. Now I have realized the self. The self is the blank mind. But then as he realized that, the mind was no longer blank. And then he said, I'm going to go there back, because now that I got in touch with the self, I want to become very intimately related to the self. So I got in touch. Now I want to present myself better and then become good friends with the self, so that I can be as often as possible associate with the self. That is the reasoning. So he said, let me go back there. Enough of talk, enough of being happy that I met the self. Let me go back. So again, he arrested his thoughts, went into deep meditation, trying to do it again. The restlessness of the mind began thus resolutely checked. He saw in an instant a blazing light with no circumference, just a light that has no end, no circumference. When he saw this light, he said, oh my God, the self is not only emptiness or blankness, but the self is also light. How exciting. And a lot of people think in those terms. Oh, the self has many faces, so we need to go through all these experiences to understand all the faces of the self. Regaining human consciousness, he came out and began to wonder, how could this happen? He was back into meditation to experience again blankness and emptiness. And then instead he experienced light. He says, oh my God, what a wonder. I mean, it seems that there is no constance here. I do the same techniques of arresting thoughts, and then when I see I have a different experience. And how can which one of those experiences I'm going to define as the self? There is no constancy. The self cannot be more than one thing. I repeat the same effort. I'm going to dive again into this deep meditation and define whether the self is the void or the light. A fair deal. So now, if I do the same experiment again and again and again, I can choose. No, 80% of the time I got the light, and then the self is the light. But instead, he did not go to blankness. He did not go to the light. He went into a celestial long sleep. So it was more than a Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It was a long sleep with celestial dreams, wonderful dreams, in which he was on those celestial lokas, having incredible experience, wonderful punya. But then when he came up, instead of being just confused, because he was highly qualified, he said, so no, it cannot be the self. Now I'm really furiously pissed off, because I do the same thing, and now another experience comes. So I'm wasting my time here because there is something wrong, and I'm getting frustrated. So how is it that I was overpowered by sleep, celestial sleep, and start to have these wonderful dreams. The darkness before the light I saw must also be in the nature of the same dream. I'm dreaming here. The emptiness and the light and this celestial dream, it is all of the same nature, is the nature of the mind. Dreams are mental imagery. So how shall I overcome the dreams? How can I overcome the mind with mental projections? So I understood that the obstruction was coming from the mind in the world. Yeah? The mind in contact with the world was coming the obstruction. I want to arrest the world by arresting the mind, the thought. But then instead of having the experience of thought, I had some mystical experience of light, emptiness, and whatever, epiphany, okay? Including celestial dreams, sounds, and so on. So everything here is by the nature of obstruction, with obstructions coming from the mind and its projection. The projection of mind, Maya projection of mind itself. Now, how am I to overcome them? I shall again repress my thoughts and see, he said. And he said, but this is the last time, he said. This is the last time. Okay? It reminds me someone here. And then I shall again repress my thoughts and see. His mind was still for a time. He was sunk, as it were, in an ocean of bliss. Very nice, huh? So now there were no real imageries or emptiness or light. So that now he went into a subtler thought of state, mental state, which was not even project phenomenality. It was not projecting things. It was just a state on which there was great satisfaction. This great satisfaction of a mind, the mind of the yoga, well resolved, and not going into epiphanies, not going to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it produced bliss. So this bliss, I know this bliss because that's where I was stuck for a little while, this bliss. So now he was into the bliss dream, the bliss, which is an experience that is a very valid experience, but unless we are not stuck with it, okay? If we have the knowledge to understand that this bliss is just a reflection of my true nature, because my mind became very sattvic, and then it produced a reflection. The reflection is not a light, it's not an image, it's not a projection of Nidra Shakti, like a dream. It's not a thought, This reflection is not a projection, is just the fragrance of the self, okay? Because it's the limitless nature of the self being reflected, but it's still an experience and it's still bound by time. He was sunk in this bliss. Shortly afterwards, he regained his original state. The mind changed again. The mind again beginning to function. The gunas again, they're modified in their proportions. And the mind lost that condition on which there was this beautiful reflection of limitless feelings, or of the nature of the self. He reflects, what is all of this? It is a dream, it is an hallucination of the mind. My experience is a fact, but it surpassed my imagination. Now I don't understand. Now I'm experiencing bliss. And this bliss, it's not something that's coming from my projection of the mind, because there are no projections, there is just this sense of bliss. Okay, the bliss is a very, very beautiful thing. When I read it this morning before we begin our class, I said, oh man, I'm going to go back to meditate again. because in the past I used to meditate to experience this bliss. And then I got so frustrated, I say, I will never again to meditate. But it's a nice experience. Understand? If you know that it's better than watching soccer, Champions League of soccer. You understand? So I'm not playing, I'm not kidding. I'm saying, I mean, the world is so troubled. There are so many potential events, disturbing the mind a little bit. I'm going to go to become a yogi, yeah, and start being in deep meditation. Why not? If we want to have an experience, let's have an experience of our fullness in a mind totally resolved. Now, the world is too much trouble. Why is that bliss quite unique? And unlike any bliss that I have experienced before, what is unique about this bliss? Because it's not relate to any object of experience. There are no, we say that the bliss is a very subtle object of experience, but it's so subtle, okay? And it's not coming from contacting the world. It's coming from contact your true nature to the extent that your mind is so reflective that the fragrance of your true nature is experienced as a reproduction, as a reflection. So it's a unique kind of experience, this bliss. The highest of all my past experience, yeah, emptiness, and then the celestial dream, and then the light and the bliss. Of all of these experience, this bliss is the most superior. This bliss I was in just now is the highest compared to the other three. It was like sleep insofar as I was not externally aware. It is like in sleep because you are not contacting the world. Your mind is just taken over by this deep sense of happiness, satisfaction, which now relate to any thought or any object that you are contact. It was not Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it was not deep sleep, but I was not in contact with anything of the world, but there was a peculiar bliss at the same time. The reason is not clear to me because there was nothing to impart pleasure to me. There was nothing to, where is this bliss coming from, Lynn? There was nothing to impart this bliss to me, but it was coming. Then he started figuring out it's coming from my true nature. If it's not coming from the level of obstruction, it's coming from my true nature. But then when we come to Vedanta, Vedanta says that even this reflection can become an obstruction. The final, the most seductive obstruction. The expression is stuck in bliss, stuck in Sattva-guna. So, but if you have your self-knowledge, if you understand the whole play, if you understand your experience, and you understand what you are doing, there is no harm to experience bliss. You understand? That's why there are Mahatmas, there are Yanis that are yogis as well, and there is nothing wrong with it. Yes, Lynn?
Well, that's true, but after a while, if you just meditate, and it just gets boring. I don't know how. It's same old bliss, which is why I stopped meditating. Yeah. I just thought,
Okay. I'm going to try, and then I get back to you to see if I come to the same conclusion. It's boring. It's better go back to contacting the world and going through all the ups and downs of the experience.
But then after that bliss, you'll always go back to contacting the world with the ups and downs.
Yeah.
Total. It just doesn't fulfill it. It's not satisfying in the end. There's something missing.
I will let you know. I will give it a try again. I will see. Mark, you try as well, huh? And then we report to one another later on in the future.
I try every morning, Arlindo. Still trying.
It was a peculiar bliss. The reason is not clear to me because there was nothing to impart pleasure to me. Although I attempt to know the self, I do not do so. I do not know the self. I was trying to know the self. I see the self differently now. And again, change. What can it be? Is it darkness, light, pleasure, or bliss? Oh, it's possible that these are all successive forms of the self, could be all different faces of the self. I do not understand it. Let me go back to Himaleka, my wife. Okay, so we stop here. We begin next week, verse 55. And anything else? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you, my friends. Lovely satsang. Good to be with you. We meet again coming Monday. Coming Monday. Yeah. Namaste.
Thanks, Arlindo.
Excellent. Thank you, Arlindo. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.